Can I ask you to join me in a prayer of blessing over this morning? Father God, we that are gathered here today, thank you for your presence among us. We ask you to look with favor upon the events of this day and to bless them. We thank you for the life of our father, Adolph Jr., and his wife, Blanche, for the life of his father, Adolph Sr., and his wife, Dolores, and for the remarkable families you've allowed us to enjoy and be connected to, represented in this room full of memories today. You're a good, good Father, and once again, we ask your blessings on all that transpires here today. In your Son's name, amen. Okay, housekeeping, couple of housekeeping. You guys, stand up. Okay, so my eyes are too bad to see which of my nieces are back there. But we already have two very capable helpers in the nursery right across the courtyard. If you have a baby or a toddler and they'd like a little more freedom, then they're probably going to be allowed here because I'm a parent too. Feel free to take here comes a baby now. Feel free if you wish to take those babies across to the nursery. Kira and Lacey are already over there. There'll be a craft room upstairs in room 7 where they can build things. If you've got toddlers or little ones that want to enjoy things, there'll be people monitoring the play yard. So we've got lots of coverage. So don't feel that any of the children have to be constrained. There are restrooms at the back of the sanctuary. There are restrooms across the courtyard in the activity center. There are what do you call those restrooms, Linda? Preschool restrooms? There are preschool restrooms straight across. I can't think of any other housekeeping thing. When this is all over, we'll have a wonderful meal provided courtesy of Judy Montes. And now it would be my privilege to introduce the guy who saved me from getting beat up by Bobby Chavez in 4th grade, the best big brother ever, A-Bone.
That was an awful experience. Thanks for coming. You know, the one thing you can say about Dad was, it was great to be a kid of his. Everywhere you went, under any circumstances, you had points on your side because you were his kid. I took him to East LA downtown LA to see a play that a bunch of my friends were in. And I took him backstage afterwards, and I was going to introduce him to my friends, and more of those people back there knew him than knew me. A moment when things changed for all of us was that he, for me anyway, he escaped, as I'm sure you're going to hear, probably from Michael. He escaped from a German prison camp with a gentleman named Roy Rogel. The Rogel family is represented here today. And when Roy passed on, quite a while ago, Dad was asked to come and stand up for him at his memorial. And I was so worried about it. And I couldn't believe how Dad lifted that room in that hour of difficulty. I mean, he had the place in a state of joy. And when this event came up, I was thinking, how did he do that, you know? I don't know how he did it. But he did it. We're also represented by the Arechiga family. That was another pivotal moment in our family's history, because my dad was a pretty gentle dude, except on the tennis court. And when Eddie Arechiga and my dad's little sister Lillian disappeared off the face of California, went away with no word, my dad and his brothers were up in arms. And I heard them talking about about this guy, Eddie, and I'm laying in my bed in the middle of the night going, wow, something really different is happening here. You know? And, of course, Eddie and Lillian came back and produced an amazing family and have one of the great marriages that I've ever witnessed. So Dad was privy to that, but, you know, we all saw him through our own eyes, our own templates. But I think no one came to know him better, I'm sure of this, than our sister Diane, who was his go-to human for the last years of his life. And it's my privilege to introduce Diane to talk about Dad.
I'll just read your stuff.
Yeah. I don't think so.
Wow. Just wow. It's really good to see all your faces. And that you all came out here to honor Dad and our family. We've been so blessed by so many wonderful people in our lives. And I'm so thankful. This is kind of weird for me because I feel like I've been promoted. I'm usually number 5 on the food chain. But this way I can get it done, sit down. So I get a lot of praise, right, for taking care of my daddy, which was it was a really hard gig, and I totally deserve the praise, just saying. But it would have been a nearly impossible feat for me to do and to manage without my Jen. That girl was with me every step of the way when I was at my wit's end through the muck and the funk, and or just when I was feeling like I am so not trained for this, I don't know what I'm doing. And we'd get together and kind of figure it out, and then times where we both are just ready to cry, we would act stupid and laugh like fools, and Dad would just look at us and go, you know, and then we'd start bagging on each other, and I'd say, Dad, Jen's treating me bad. She's being terrible to me. No, Dad, it's Sis. She's being terrible. He'd be like, girls. But without that woman, I couldn't have done what I did. Kiki, are you here? Okay, so there's this beautiful human, Kiki. We all know my dad's hair, right? His hair was everything. And Kiki has cut my dad's hair forever. And when it got to a point where he could no longer physically go to the shop, Kiki would come to the house. She would work all day on her feet, and then she'd come, and when Daddy was stuck in the bed, she would climb all over that bed like a howler monkey on a tree and do his hair. And he always felt so good after that, and I'd tell him, you know, you are one fine-looking specimen, Dad. He goes, I know, it's a curse. and he felt that way. There's been a lot of really wonderful people in our lives that have reached out to help us through this. I just want to say to Linda Milner, girl, Linda produced this video here. Yeah. So the biggest thing for me, you know, we all had the same father, but we had different daddies, right? And I think I always had a little bit different one because I was the only girl. But through this process, I remember coming to points in time where I had to have some very difficult conversations with him about things he needed to stop doing or things he needed to start doing, and thinking, he's such a proud man, and he's gonna just fight me on it, and it's gonna be terrible, and I'm gonna make him feel bad. And he just made it so easy on me every time. I know, honey, you're right. As in all of his life, he handled everything with such grace and such dignity. Dude impressed me all the time. So our biggest thing over the last many years has been watching basketball. We watched tons of basketball. And so the game would come on, and I'd hoot and holler and make such a fuss. Again, he would just shake his head. And so somebody would come on, I'd tell him, that's my boyfriend. He's like, who's your boyfriend? I said, right there, Blake Griffin, he's my boyfriend. He's your boyfriend? I'm like, yeah, he doesn't know me. He might be married and have kids, I don't know, but he's my boyfriend. So then, Blake would move on to some other team. It was always the Clippers and Lakers, so then I'd get a new boyfriend. And I tell him all the time, and then sometimes he'd go, I don't like your boyfriend's hair today. He's got a rat tail. I'm like, and at one point, Steph Curry comes on and he goes, is he your boyfriend too? I said, oh no, Steph is way out of my league. So we had a lot of fun doing that. And I was taking care of him. I would walk in the room. I haven't showered in 3 days. My hair's sticking up. I looked terrible, and I'd walk in and he'd say, you're so beautiful. And then, of course, when I would make an effort, like today, put on nice clothes, did my hair, put on some makeup, nothing. Not a word. So, Mom and Dad had 6 kids. We all took partners. And then through marriages within those partnerships and children born, he had 29 grandchildren, 25 great-grandchildren, and 4 great-great-grandchildren. We are 70 strong when we are all gathered for Christmas. And we don't consider that extended family. To us, that's just family. That's just it. And Rick talked when Mommy passed about, will we all still gather because she was the glue. And Daddy was still here and we all still gathered, and Daddy's gone now too. We're all the glue. It's just gonna keep going. Family was to him everything and is to all of us everything. And until I see him again, I think the thing I'm gonna miss the most is going in there and having him say, how's my girl? Thank you guys so much.
Actually, I asked Greg how he wanted to be introduced. He said, well, just tell everybody I'm so good looking. And, that goes without saying. So here's Greg.
We got a booster seat for you, Bill. When I look out here, I see a room full of family. Not all blood relatives, but everybody here family. So thank you all for coming to remember my dad. We're not here to grieve. We're here to celebrate Dad's life. Dad loved life. Dad loved people. If you knew my dad, you knew how much he loved interacting with people, introducing himself and all of his kids and telling everybody what we did and who we were married to and where we lived. And if you met my dad, you liked my dad. He's just one of those guys. He treated everybody with respect, and he would remember everybody's name after a brief introduction, which I've always tried to mimic and I've never been able to achieve, but I realize what a valuable tool that is to really listen to what people are saying, not just think about your response. Dad loved to eat. When Dad was a prisoner of war briefly in World War II, there was very little rations, so he was starving. He lost, gosh, 40 pounds, 50 pounds. So from that day on, Dad appreciated food. Okay, when the Sizzler got their first salad bar, my mom and Dad are there with my daughters Rachel and Nikki, and Nikki comes up with a bowl of mousse, lemon mousse for dessert. She's eating it, and Dad says, "What is that, Nikki?" And she goes, "Well, that's lemon mousse, Grandpa." He goes, "Where is it?" He goes, "It's on the salad bar." So Dad went over, got a couple big scoops, came back, and he's eating it, and he's just about done, and he just finally says, "This stuff is awful." Mom looks over and says, "Adolph, you're eating whipped butter." So, Dad was colorblind. So Dad was always positive. So everybody here who knows my dad knows this. With my dad, the glass was always half full. He always had something encouraging to say. He would find something positive in every situation. It's a great trait to have. Dad was a competitor. Growing up, I always remember him on the tennis court taking on all comers. Dad would compliment his opponents on their game while systematically dismantling them. He was a beast on the tennis court, but he was polite. Dad gave me a love for competition. I started racing motorcycles as a teenager, and there's a period that all teenagers have when we weren't seeing eye to eye. But when I'd bring a trophy home, he would get a gleam in his eye, and I could see he was proud of that achievement. So I came to treasure that look when I'd bring that home, and I'd rode my ass off every weekend to try and make it happen on a regular basis. We were 6 kids, 5 boys and 1 girl. We occasionally needed some discipline. As I understand it, A was basically pretty good. Now, he was 12 when I was born, so I don't really remember him till he was finishing high school. Billy, Mike, and I tested the boundaries. Diane was a girl. So it seemed like she never did anything wrong. Rick watched the rest of us grow up, and he became a sheriff. We had 2 justice systems back then. So Mom was kind of like our field superintendent. She was like moms everywhere. She always knew what we were doing, even though we thought we were pulling the wool over her eyes. We, Mike and I, would be 3 blocks away behind the library smoking cigarettes and playing toss the candle with the neighborhood girls. And all of a sudden, Mom would come through the bushes with a peach switch in her hand. We would be charged, tried, convicted, and punished inside of 60 seconds. If you ever had that peach switch, you got a hold of your hand, and it's just like you're on a merry-go-round. You're running around, and you're getting lit up. Whenever I got in trouble, it was a direct result of Mike leading me astray. If our transgressions were big enough to get kicked upstairs to Dad, we would have to stand trial. We would be on death row, our bedrooms, waiting for him to come home, read his paper, then call us into the den. He'd have you sit in that chair, and he would ask you if you knew what you did was wrong. That's tough. And then he'd ask you why you did it. Man, you never had a good answer for any of those things. By the time he took off his belt and gave you a couple licks, it was a relief. I mean, you just hated to disappoint him. We vastly preferred my mom's justice system. It was quick. Dad had a great, dry sense of humor, and he had this big, booming laugh. All of his brothers have it. A lot of us brothers have it. I can still picture my dad now laughing about something, just that great look of delight and that big, booming laugh, and that's how I remember my dad. When I was 16 years old, I grew taller than my dad, but I never stopped looking up to my dad. Yeah. He is and always will be a hero to this little boy. When Dad passed, he had Diane, Rick, and Jen holding his hands and his heart, surrounded by love and family, and that's a privilege denied to many. My dad lived to be 98 years old. He had a good life, and once again, thank you all for coming here to mark this event. Thank you. This is my brother Mike, who led me astray. He's going to come up here and tell you some stuff.
I stand wrongly accused. Bill told me what to do. Diane said earlier she couldn't have accomplished what she did without Jennifer. Sorry, this hangs up on my forehead.
Yeah, you just need to get closer to your mouth, so
But Diane and Jennifer together were Dad's guardian angels for many years. Their love and selfless work sustained him and all of us. And I offer my deepest love and respect for their dedication and devotion to that duty. I also thank my brother Billy for his leadership in making this service come together. All things involved in this service went through Billy.
thank you, man.
Now, Mom and Dad, there really is no separating the memory of Mom and Dad from one from the other. They're inseparable team. They're the breath of life itself. They're inhaling and exhaling. But for the next few minutes, I'm going to do just that. My siblings have and will cover the team that they were and always will be. And for the next few minutes, I'm going to talk real briefly about Dad's World War II experiences, just so that I can tell you about a story. A week he and I spent together 15 years ago in Belgium. He graduated high school straight into World War II. He was 19 years old. He joined the 17th Airborne. He tried the Marines, but found out he was colorblind. They didn't want him. My uncle, Eddie Arechica, great family historian, in his family chronology called Mi Vida, he comments that we Marines always hear about how paratroopers scream Geronimo when they jump out of an aircraft. He goes, we laugh as Marines because we know they're really saying, I don't want to go. He served in the 17th Airborne, the 513th Parachute Infantry Regiment. He turned 21 years old, sitting on a C-47 transport in England, waiting to cross the English Channel to join the Battle of the Bulge. He's spoken often on the night of January 3rd, 1945. And that's a significant date in our family because it was also January 3rd, 2014 when our mother passed away. It was the coldest winter on record in the Ardennes, 20 to 30 degrees below zero. And they could hear the German voices across the snowy field from their foxholes at the edge of the Ardennes forest. And then the German bombardment and artillery barrage started and lasted all night long. Their mission was to take a German position the next morning and capture prisoners for interrogation, then fight their way into Bastogne in relief of the 101st Airborne. The following morning, January 4th, they launched their attack. They took a German stronghold farmhouse and captured prisoners as instructed for interrogation. Next to that barn house was a stone barn. And Dad, who was raised in the church, always referred to it as the stone manger.
Hey, Meek, sorry. I'm going to get the mic closer to you so we can stop the overing.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Stay closer to the mouth.
That's better?
Yeah.
No more echo? Am I too loud? Okay. It was a brutal fight. They suffered major casualties. They had been promised artillery support that morning, but it turned out that the original attack was scheduled for January 7th, and there was a reschedule to January 3rd, but nobody told the artillery platoon. So they attacked with no artillery support. Dad often said, it was just a snafu, one of those things. Situation normal, all fouled up. The casualties included Dad's best buddy, Burl Gray, who was severely wounded as crossing an open road called the Bastogne Highway. Dad heard incoming artillery and he dove into a ditch just as an 88 exploded and caught Burl, flipped him up into the air, blew out a chunk of his neck, took out his collarbone. Dad grabbed him, unconscious and convulsing, pulled him into the ditch, treated his wounds with sulfa powder, bandaged him, and called for the medics. Then Burl was taken into the stone manger, still unconscious. Burl survived that war with Dad, but both of them thought the other was killed that day. And it was a good 50 years later that they realized they were both still alive and made a connection through one of the Gray family members. We remain close to the Gray family, who live far, far away, and we have Mark and Pam here today from representing the family. In late afternoon, 4 Sherman tanks appeared on Dead Man's Ridge above them. For a moment, they were elated, and they cheered their salvation. But within moments, all 4 of those Sherman tanks were taken out by the bigger, heavier German tanks. Out of 120 men in Company C, 85 were dead or missing, including all but 1 wounded officer. Roughly 20 lay wounded in the stone manger, and Dad was one of 15 combatants still fighting. When a German Tiger tank drove up to the stone manger, lowered his turret gun into the doorway. One of the other 15 was a trooper named Sandy Lunkeman, who was German-born, spoke fluent German. He jumped out of his hole, unarmed, ran to the tank commander, shouting, "Stop, stop. These are our wounded. What are you going to do?" The tank commander opened the hatch and said, "I'm going to kill your wounded and then kill the rest of you unless you surrender to me now." Lunkeman asked for an opportunity to radio for instruction. Tank commander agreed, and an arrangement was made. He would spare the wounded, allow them to be evacuated back to Allied lines in exchange for the 15 remaining combatants, of which Dad was one. He always said January 4th was a bad day. We were decimated. Foot soldiers are no match for armor and mass, but at least we saved the wounded. From there, they embarked on what Dad described as the greatest diet known to man. You simply march from one country to the next. In the course of about a week and a half, he lost 50 or so pounds, barely weighing over 100 pounds when he got to the first camp. On their way, as they marched into Germany, a German farmer came out of a farmhouse with a shotgun and he signaled the guards to step aside because he wanted to kill those American prisoners. The guards stopped him and disarmed him, and then later explained through Lunkeman that the farmer had lost his son to Allied bombs and wanted revenge. So ironically, his German captors saved his life that day. The first camp was Stalag 12A. A week later, it was taken to Stalag 4B. So many stories about the camps, but I can't go into them here. The War Department sent a telegram to his parents, our grandparents, Mama and Papa. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, we regret to inform you." Mama could barely see through her tears. Which one was it? Was it Adolph or was it Arturo, his brother? She had 2 in that war. Then she saw it was Junior, as she called him. And she said, "He's not killed in action, he's only missing. There is hope." Dad met Trooper Roy Rogel in that second camp. He remembers seeing a guy doing push-ups in the prison yard. He had his feet on a tabletop and his hands on two chairs, and he was doing push-ups that went below the surface of the chairs. All the other POWs were haggard and ragged, but Roy Rogel was a specimen of strength and condition. Dad said, "I'm going to make that man my best friend." And he did. When he introduced himself to Roy, he told Roy, he said, "The Germans gave me a lot of stuff for my name Adolph, and my fellow troopers gave me a lot of stuff for my name Adolph. So you can just call me my middle name, Larue." And that's what Roy did. He called him Larue. The story goes on. They were taken to a prison camp up in Leipzig to clean bomb rubble, and they made their escape together on April 12th, the same day President Roosevelt died. The story explodes with remarkable adventure at this point. I'm not going to go into it, but I'll just tell you that they were recaptured by the German Home Guard, the Volkssturm. They re-escaped. They broke into Hermann Göring's office. Göring was the commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, the founder of the Gestapo. They took German prisoners as unarmed POWs. Many, many more stories for another time. We lost Roy way too soon, 40 years ago, September '82. But are blessed to have grown up with the Rogel family. All four of Roy's children are here today: Eileen, Randy, Peggy, Sally, and many grandchildren. We'll introduce you to them in the break room after for lunch. So at the final reunion of the 17th Airborne in Arlington, Virginia, 2006, or 7, a young police officer from Brussels took the podium. He said, "Men of the 17th, you are beloved by we Belgians. More than 60 years ago, at 18, 19, and 20, you traveled halfway around the world to fight and die in a land not your own. For a people you did not know, you gave us our lives and our future, and for this we owe you everything we have and everything we will ever have. Come to Belgium as our honored guests." I had the privilege of escorting my dad and another trooper, Lawton Clark, and his wife to Belgium, December 2007. He arrived there December 1944. We arrived December 2007. It was the 63rd anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, and the area was crawling with reenactors, which is a big thing in Europe, apparently, about World War II. Dad wore his airborne jump jacket with his 17th and 513th parachute patches and his golden talon emblem for the 17th. Everywhere we went, reenactors would shout out, "10 Hut, we've got the real deal here." And they would jump and snap to attention and salute him. It was cathartic for him. For 8 days, people ran to hug him and kiss him on both cheeks and to weep into his chest. I can't tell you, 30, 40 times in 8 days this happened. It truly was cathartic. He told me in tears the night before we left Belgium that he had harbored great shame and guilt for having survived when so many had died. But for that week we spent together had changed how he felt about the war and especially about himself. How could I have been so blessed as to have been able to share that moment with him? We stayed in a 1,500-year-old monastery converted to a bed and breakfast. It was spectacular. Frescoes of monks on the walls, a massive fireplace where we gathered every morning and evening for food, and our French-speaking host simply fed us. There was no menus. We just ate and were grateful. One of those days, we traveled to Bastogne. It was the 63rd anniversary I mentioned before. And as we decided, we stopped for lunch at a restaurant, and we were making our way through to the back of the hotel or the restaurant. We passed a banquet table filled with 101st Airborne vets in their mid-80s, typically. And as we passed the table, one of the 101st guys turned and looked at Dad and saw all of his emblems, the 17th, and he said, "17th Airborne? What's the matter, buddy? You lost or something?" Dad said, "No, hadn't you heard? We were sent here to bail you boys out." They all laughed. The 101st guy continued. He said, "You know, we used to call you Golden Talon boys, don't you?" Dad said, "No, what?" He said, "We used to call you boys the Chicken Claws." Dad laughed and nodded. He goes, "That's pretty good, because we know you called you Screaming Eagle Head boys." The guy said, "No, what?" He goes, "We used to call you boys the Puking Pigeons." To which they all roared with laughter and invited us to join them for lunch that day, which we did. Now, all of you here today know Dad was a dignified man. He comported himself with a stature of social grace. He was a competitor, to be sure. He played tennis until he was 91 years old. But above all else, he was a man of decorum, never known to be a smack talker. But for that brief moment in Bastogne with his elderly brothers in arms, he and they were back to 19 years old, back to 1944, giving each other the same stuff they gave each other in those days. It was a glorious day to be a fly on that wall. I'll close with this crystallized memory. Our last night, we relocated to a hotel near the airport in Brussels. Directly behind the hotel was a town square, sunken several flights below. And the town square was surrounded by government buildings, multi-stories with spires galore. And all the spires were lit with different brilliantly lit flood lamps. It looked like a scene from Disneyland. We went down into that square. It was a canvas-covered tent city of vendors, and we walked for hours and shopped for souvenirs, etc. And just before midnight, we headed back up the long flight of stairs to the upper deck. And just as we reached the upper deck, we had been listening to, by the way, on the PA system, all of the European great composers, Mozart, Beethoven, Wagner. But as we got to the top of the stairs, the 12th bell chimed over the PA, and whoever was in charge of the music broke into Bohemian Rhapsody. It was surreal. It truly was surreal. People started pouring out of the shops. They were twirling and laughing and dancing all over the place. I was stunned, and I started to look back and forth for the cameras because surely this was a flash mob and it was going to be recorded, but there were no cameras. It was just pure joy. Dad looked at me after a moment with a familiar quizzical look. And he said, "You know, Mike, I recognize most of this music we've been listening to tonight, but I don't quite recognize this tune." And I said, "Dad, that's Freddie Mercury and Queen." I said, "Isn't it wonderful?" And he looked out at that scene below us, and he said, yes, it is. And when I reflect back on the life he and Mom lived, and the family they created, and the love and kindness they generated through their own relationship in the lives of so many other people, I trust, as they look down upon us here today together, that they can respond to that same question, "Mom and Dad, isn't this wonderful?" And in unison, they say, yes, yes it is. And with that, I'd like to invite Romero Gomez to come up for a moment.
Wow, amazing there, Mike. Wow. Yeah, you sure can. Well, it's good to see everybody, and it's good to be back here in New Hope Community Church with Pastor Eddie and the Martinez family to celebrate the life of Mr. Martinez. When our family, the Gomez family, was told that Mr. Martinez went home to be present with our Lord, our hearts were heavy. Let us rejoice knowing that Adolph is with Blanche and our loved ones in the kingdom of heaven. My name is Romero Gomez. My first name in Spanish is Ramiro, as Adolph would say with his proud Latino voice. The Gomez family has known the Martinez close to 50 years, and we are truly blessed to have Adolph and the Martinez family in our lives. Our family has the highest respect for Mr. Martinez for his love and support he gave to us. In the early 70s, when my brothers and sisters and I were kids, our parents separated and things at home were tough. Adolph and Blanche opened their hearts and their home to us. We are forever grateful. Mr. Martinez was an amazing man who displayed a positive outlook on life and was a true gentleman. He has been a strong influence in my life, and I want to share how he touched my heart and what he did for me. When I was a teenager, I was in trouble with the law. My father, who spoke very little English, appeared with me in court. I thought I was going to be sent to juvenile hall that morning. Mr. Martinez was in court, much to my surprise. He asked the judge to release me into his custody. At that time, Adolph was the principal at Haddon Elementary School in Pacoima. And the judge agreed to release me into Adolph's custody, and boy, was I glad. But I had to attend Pacoima Junior High School. Those days, Pacoima was a tough neighborhood. Adolph was still the principal at Haddon Elementary School. The junior high was near the elementary school. Often he would drive me to school in his 1974 American Motors called the Matador. It was a cool car, and they kept it very clean. The first week at school, I decided to hide my books near Haddon Elementary School. And I can tell you, it was the wrong thing to do. After school, I went to recover my books, and they were gone. As I walked into Adolph's office, he tells me to sit down. As he turns around, he places my books on his desk. I can feel the heat rise through my body. I was ashamed and embarrassed. Adolph told me that if you want to start a career, you need to stay in school and get an education. As I got older and wiser, I knew that I changed my ways. With hard work, determination, and perseverance, with Mr. Martinez's advice, I started my career as a firefighter. As Adolph would always ask, Ramiro, how are you? Staying at the Martinez home was amazing. There were lots of love and those big Martinez hugs. There was so much food that they could feed their neighborhood, which they did. And there was always music playing as it runs deep in the Martinez's hearts. During the holidays, when the Martinez family got together, friends of the family would always stop by, as it was the coolest place to be, and they were always welcome to the Martinez home. All of this because of Adolph's love. Adolph loved to play tennis, and he would go running early in the morning. And yes, Adolph would be wearing his Adidas clothing and tennis shoes. I saw the love that Adolph has for his family, being a good son to his mama and papa, as well as a great husband, father, and grandfather. I learned a lot about family values, like kindness, responsibility, honest, and faith, and the importance of spending time with family through Adolph's love. Adolph had a special gift when talking to people, especially to my father, who was not an easy man to please. My father respected Adolph. I can honestly tell you that I have never seen Adolph lose his cool or yell out in anger. His heart is filled with love and kindness. He is a man with integrity, respect, and loyalty, and proud of his family heritage. I've seen the love and commitment Adolph gave to the community, especially to Latino families, a great role model, highly respected from the community, and always taking the time to help others in need. Adolph inspired me. He's been my role model and a mentor. I have set high standards and goals for myself, and keeping Adolph and Blanche proud of who I became, and failure was not an option. During my career as a firefighter, I was given many opportunities to serve the community. I was very proud to give it back to the community as Adolph did. I received certificate of community service and awards and have dedicated them to Adolph and Blanche for showing me their love. As I watched my family grow and retire in my career, I have never forgotten who supported me and who I admired. I'm honored, grateful, and blessed to have Adolph Martinez as a father figure. To A, Billy, Mike, Diane, Rick, and Martinez family, thank you for sharing your father's love with the Gomez family. We will always have Adolph Martinez in our hearts. Señor Martinez, que Dios te bendiga. May God continue to bless us with his love and grace.
How are you, family? How you doing? Oh, that makes a big difference. So I couldn't help but think about, Greg made that statement about how Dad always remembered everybody's name, and what a talent that was. And I think it was about a month ago, I was at the local cafe, and I bumped into Richard and Larry Obar, who are here with us today. And I was, yeah, there's Richard, yeah. So I love a guy who will play. But so I'm struggling to remember the name, and they said, oh, we really loved your dad, Billy. He never forgot our names. Bing, perfect. And Ramiro just spoke about the Matador that was a cool car and a little bit low. And I think when I was, one of my episodes living up in the canyon, and you had to cross a stream to get to my house. And I had car trouble, and my parents lent me that Matador. I think that was the end of it. Because I really tried hard to get across that stream in that with a 10-inch ground clearance. I think I got hung up on boulders. It may have washed away. I don't know. Because my dad was close with his siblings, we have really fond memories of our uncles and aunts and spouses and cousins. Uncle Bobby's many kindnesses to me and my buddies up at his house. Loved being up at Uncle Bobby's and watching Uncle Joel and Bobby and Dad working out with weights and chin-up bars together up at that Samoa house. I loved, and Ronnie, are you here, Ronnie? Oh, there you are. Yeah. And hey, Mike. Yeah. So I loved with my buddies being down at Aunt Alma's in the evenings, and she'd play music and she'd just talk with us, and it was so great. We had just a great time. We would get to go swimming up at Uncle Joel's house, and that was really fun. And it was really fun hanging out with Art and Chris, both at Mama and Papa's, and going to visit you guys. We were so blessed to grow up. The type of relationship that we as siblings have was modeled on what you guys brought. So thank you so much. So much. And my cousin Bobby came over from England, man. How cool is that? It's so good to see you, Bobby. Amen. And when you went up to Bobby and Jimmy's parents' house, Ed and Lil, it was like magic because they would have the Beatles playing, and of course Uncle Eddie, who was the most soulful guy I ever knew, he'd have James Brown, you know, that was his guy, but it was just such a great time, and I just had such a wonderful time growing up with all of our cousins. And we had a lot of fun. There you are. Hey, Wayne. Hey, Vicky. and our Tom's cousins and being with the Dow cousins. And I don't think any of them are here today. Is there any Dows here? No. Well, they're watching and streaming. But it's just, we had a great life growing up, a big familia. It was just wonderful. And Dad had a great sense of humor. It's been alluded to, but one of the reasons we loved our 29 Palms cabin is that's where Dad let his hair down. And we had the opportunity to have some fun and to draw closer to him around that campfire. It was really something. He loved everything about the cabins. The cooking outdoors, the hikes. He would organize us in line with our BB guns to shoot down Army men. It was so freaking cool. Nah, I'm not even going to say that. No, let that go. It was fun, and we'd go into town to the local place where things were cast off, and we'd find treasures like stoves and cabinets and things, and we outfitted our cabins and all our relatives' cabins, and it was just fun. And Dad loved having visitors come out. He was like the desert host, you know. Here's a snake. Here's a tarantula. The Orechigas would come out, and we'd have fun. And it's been spoken of, the Rogel family would come out. And it was just a delight. And one of my favorite episodes out there, the desert, centers around Mom and Roy Rogel. We didn't have many new things, and Mom had just got this beautiful new pancake turner. and she was just tickled pink. And Mom, grown up as a southern farm girl, and she thought tarantulas were really beneficial in the way they killed black widows in the wood piles and they kept other pests down. She just liked tarantulas. And she called out for us to see one which had crawled up on her counter where she was cooking one morning. And Mom said, "Kids, come quick, a tarantula." And before we could get there, Roy Rigel, who was raised in New York, he jumped up, grabbed my mom's brand new pancake turner, and smashed that tarantula flat. And then he said, "I got him, Blanche." Well, Mom just sputtered, but that was my new. But like I said, Dad would step out of character at the cabin, and his sense of humor came out. Dad always taught us in every situation fair play and honesty with anybody in any type of contest. And as one of my siblings alluded to, he was a gentleman about it. You never questioned another tennis player's call. But we could have some fun at the cabin. So one time we were out there, Dad had a buddy named Lou Mares, a good friend of his. And we teamed up so that Dad and I would play against A and Lou Mares, the game of password. If you're familiar with the game of password, one partner gives a clue across the table, and the other one tries to guess the word, and you go back and forth until you win. And A and Lou Mares share this thing, and they want things to be right and correct and just. You know. So I convinced Dad, I convinced Dad at a sidebar, I convinced him to help me really mess with them. When it was our turn, I looked at the word. I excused myself out to the outhouse, where I then taped the word written on a piece of tape on my shoe. I came in and I kicked Dad under the table so that he glanced down. Then I gave him the word lemonade as a clue, and he instantly gave the correct reply, baseball. It was so much fun to watch A try and contain himself because A was outraged and he knew we were cheating, but it was Dad and he could not accuse Dad. And Dad loved storytelling and skits around the campfire, and he enjoyed a practical joke. Hey, Ronnie, stand up, man. Stand up. Okay, so at one time, stay there, Ronnie. So at one time, we're finishing up around the campfire, and Dad says to Ronnie, he said, Ronnie, I'll bet you that you cannot stand on this chair while I circle it 3 times. And Ronnie said, I think I can, Mr. Martinez. And Ronnie got up on the chair, and Dad walked around the chair twice and went in the cabin and went to sleep. And you know, again, my dad engendered a lot of respect. So I remember Ronnie, you know, and then Ronnie figured, okay, all right, I just got had. Both Dad and Mom cared for and opened their house to people, as has been mentioned. We had a fella named Young Ja Kim from Korea who stayed with us for 4 to 6 weeks through the YMCA Wiseman program. Mr. Kim loved all of my mom's Southern cooking, and Dad made sure he went home with several bags of oranges, as they were such a delicacy in Korea. There was a German woman working at the YMCA. Dad was, one of his many other jobs was running the local YMCA. And she wanted to bring her nephew over for a couple of weeks, but really she lived in a studio apartment and didn't know what to do. And so they said, he can stay with us. So a young guy named Eberhard Spriegel, who was 13 like me, stayed in my room for 2 or 3 weeks. And what an education. It was so cool. It was so cool. And Dad, I think they made jokes about Dad not being able to figure out the whip butter. Dad would just eat anything. All right, and I get this stuff from my kids because I do the same thing, and I'm not dead yet, but they're always telling me don't eat that. But Dad really, really loved my mom's pumpkin pie. I mean, that was it for him. And my buddy Mike Ketchum is sitting back there next to Ronnie, who was one time staying in the garage with me for a while. And Mike really loved Mom's pumpkin pie, too. And we thought that Dad didn't even know what was going on. But after the pie kept disappearing, Dad walked up to me and he said, Mike, Bill, it's cool that Mike is here with you. Would you ask him to leave me some pumpkin pie, too? And I said, sure, Dad. Fathers and sons connect with each other in different ways, and each of us do have a different relationship and story with our dad. Sports was a big deal for Dad and for me, and we played a lot of tennis across the years. One of the greatest afternoons that I can recall in my life was centered around being a 7th grade father-son Saturday afternoon at Mount Gleason Junior High School. And I was a chubby, insecure kid at this point and nervous about communicating to anybody. But that day, the school got Gail Goodrich, who was a hot shooting guard for the Lakers in the 60s, to come and give the keynote address in the auditorium. And this was followed with competitions for the boys and competitions for the dads in basketball, track, and baseball. Man, Dad just dominated in basketball. He shut everybody down, and he outran everybody in the sprint endeavors. And he held his own in baseball. I didn't even know he could play baseball. I was so proud to be his son. I was so proud of him. And I was so all of a sudden elevated in the eyes of my junior high school peers. People would be mentioning next week, wow, your dad, man, just killed me. Another day that looms pretty large for me, though, switching gears, is that as a Christian, I believe with all my heart what Jesus said in the book of John chapter 14, as he was preparing his guys for his coming departure. He told them, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, good. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. That is the truth. I'm going ahead of you to the Father to prepare a place for you. I'm going ahead that you may be with me forever. You know the way to the place where I am going. And it's big in my heart to make sure that I'll be reunited with my parents, loved ones. And I think around 30 years ago, I was walking down Burbank Boulevard with my dad, and just wanted to talk about this. And tried to get into it, and Dad said, well, I knew him as a boy, and declined to get into it further, and out of respect, I just backed away. But not too long after the surgery, I was in his bedroom one time, and we talked about this again. And he said, I'd like to know him better, that I be sure I'm reunited with Blanchie. And we prayed, and it was a wonderful, wonderful evening. And just as big for me as that track and field day. So I have pretty wonderful, rich memories with my dad. Blessings. And I forgot who's going next. Oh. And this is my brother Rick. He's cool.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rick, the youngest of the Martinez brothers, the sister.
Doggone great.
Didn't he just? Just wanted to say once again on behalf of the family, thank you all for being here today to honor my father. One of the things about being the youngest member of the family is you already sort of go a little bit further in the rotation, and a lot of the good stuff's been taken. So I only really have a couple of comments, and I hope you'll indulge me. First off, I wanted to say that it's already been spoken of, my sister Diane and my wife Jen, what they had done for my mom and for my dad in the last years of their lives. Mom, when she was getting ready to pass, and she passed in 2014, she was in a nursing home for several years beforehand. And Dad went to be with her every single day. And almost all the time, Diane went and Jen went and were also with Mom over and over and over again. And then when Dad's time came, he had a hip surgery in 2018, and he never walked again afterwards. It was hoped, because he had already been very limited in mobility, that he'd be able to go ahead and recover enough to be able to get in and out of a chair, walk to a car, and go have lunch. That would have been a huge victory for him. And it never took place. He was in the bed from 2018 to 2022. And for that whole time period, Diane, 24/7, 365, took care of him, took care of everything that he needed done with the incredible assistance of my wife, Jen. And I know it's already been acknowledged, but I'd really like to say thank you, sis, and thank you, baby, for what you did for Dad. So, it's also been talked about who my dad was. He was a Christian man. My grandfather, Papa, was a minister. Dad grew up in a Christian household. And the Bible said, be fruitful and multiply. And damn, Dad was good at math. He and Mom, with the 6 children that they had, leading to the incredible number of people that were biologically related to Mom and Dad. But beyond that, and the example given by this room today, is everybody that came into their sphere became family. I'd like to shift, because a lot of my siblings have already talked about where Dad had been, but I sort of wanted to talk for a second about an experience I had 2 weeks after Dad passed. My mom, she died in 2014, and since that time, I've dreamed about her and visited with her while sleeping 12 or so times. Always Mom and I talking, writing, speaking, just spending time together. Well, Dad passed away. And by the way, it had been mentioned that when Dad passed, Jen and Diane and I were holding his hands and stroking his hair, which was true. But my niece, Devin, who'll be coming up to sing in a few minutes, was also there with us. And Devin's hand was on my dad's heart when it stopped. I can't imagine a better passing than having 4 people who love you have their hands on you at that moment. That was a hard day, but God, I'm thankful for it. So 2 weeks afterwards, I woke up from a dream, and I told Jen about it immediately, and I felt so blessed for it. Because in my dream, I was walking with Mom and Dad in a green place. The dream started, and I couldn't say whether or not we were in a mountain pasture or a mountain glen. I know it was green and it was beautiful. And Mom and Dad, who had both spent the last several years of their lives unable to walk, unable to get out of bed, they were both strong and mature and healthy. And we were walking hand in hand, Mom and Dad and I, and Diane and Jen, and we were walking in a place that was beautiful and cool and fresh and wonderful. And I don't remember what we said, but I had such a sense of satisfaction from it. And then the way dreams do, it shifted. And we're in the house, in our house in Palmdale, in the bedroom where Mom and Dad spent the last 12 years of their marriage together. And they were married for 64 years. And we were in that room, and we were back in Dad's hospital bed. But the bed was immense. It was king size. And it was like we were when we were children. Mom was in the bed, Dad was in the bed, and Diane and Jen and I were all there, and we were all holding hands. And Mom and Dad were sitting up in bed. And I looked at Dad, and Dad was not the frail being he was right at the end of his time. Dad was full and mature. He was strong. He was the guy that had been described by my brothers. And there was a look on his face of such incredible, deep satisfaction. He was holding my mom's hand, and the look on his face was a look of utter and total contentment. And then I looked at my mom, also strong, mature, in the bloom of health, the way I remember her throughout life. And my mom's eyes were shining. They were lovely and beautiful. And they had the look in them of somebody who had been waiting for a loved one, and that loved one had arrived. A couple of minutes after that, I woke up. And I'll tell you, the death of your father, even though he lived 98 years, is a hard thing. But I felt wonderful. I recognized that where Dad was right at the end of his life was a hard place, and he had escaped it, just as he escaped the Germans, right? He had escaped it, and in the bloom of his health, he was holding my mom's hand, walking and strong. And I consider that to be a gift to me, one of the final gifts from my mother and father, like the gift of this family that has given me strength and solace my whole life. So I will close and bring my brother A-Bone up, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here and honoring my dad and my mom. They loved you all.
One of the things that happens as you go through your life, you depend on your teachers, the people that are older than you, and eventually you start to be charged with becoming a teacher. And then not too long after that, you depend on your teachers again, except now your teachers are the people that are younger than you and teach you from their youth. As has been mentioned, Daddy's daddy, Adolfo, was a preacher. I got to see him once. He was retired by then, but he was asked to do a guest sermon at a church in East LA, and Daddy took me. I was little, but I got a front row seat, and he was talking about the judgment day. El último día. He thundered. It was mesmerizing. His mother, Dolores, who's also been referenced here, the wife of this preacher, was as proper, dignified, and elegant a woman, effortlessly elegant, as anyone I'd ever met. Dad was the eldest of their children by default. He never got to meet his own older brother, a child who died before he could begin, a child who had his exact name. And in filling this lost brother's role and thriving in it, Dad learned early to navigate the emotional currents of his parents' worry and, of course, the high expectations they had of him as the eldest. He had a lot to live up to. There was a sense always in Dad that he was carrying the weight of his place in a family. In the early days of our journey with him, it seemed to me that he often kept his distance. As he went about the business of performing his life, he left a lot of space for his kids to do the same. I hungered for his approval when I was young. And when I'd do something to bring honor to the family, I'd get it. But mostly I learned to get along without it. And that was a good thing. The older I get, the more gratitude I hold for the space that he allowed us. He was never big on making demands, nor on giving advice. And I've come to believe that this way of his contributed greatly to a freedom of imagination that grew in all of us, a freedom that runs deep now. We were left to figure out a lot of stuff on our own, especially his boys. Conversely, as I'll get to, in those moments when he did offer his counsel, we listened. Our mom, as you all know, was in the middle of everything. She was the ringmaster of the household. It was a vibrant place that was open to the community to a degree that verged on overwhelm at times. She carried a sense of family that went well beyond blood, as you all know. And our home was a dependable place of shelter for anyone worthy who needed it. Dad, in my vision, seemed to be circulating on the perimeter of this circus. As I say, he gave us a lot of space. But as our provider and protector, he always came through for us. As Ramiro has mentioned, when people we love needed refuge, Dad bought wood and paint, broke out his hammer and his saw, and he created extra rooms beneath his roof. When difficulty came to the front door, our dad always stood in the threshold until difficulty went away. And as his reward for being so steadfast on our behalf, 1, 2, or sometimes more of his children would unerringly find a way to make him late to the Sunday school class he taught right across the lawn there. We knew when we had to leave, but for all 6 of us to get our butts in the car on time proved utterly impossible. For months on end, literally, we made him late. We tortured him. And to this day, I feel regretful about my part in that. Although I'm pretty sure that I was almost always on time. We all knew that he'd been the leading singles player in his college tennis team. Billy spoke about this. To watch his athleticism and fire on the courts of this town, right across the boulevard there at Sunland Park, it was breathtaking. In those early days of boyhood, watching him play, he started to seem mythical to me. He was a perfectly collegial competitor, sportsman through and through, unless he was crossed on the court by someone who started calling his shots out when they were really in. And then he would turn fierce and merciless. When Billy came into his man strength and rose up to challenge Dad on the courts, I was amazed. As for me, watching him play tennis, it just made me love baseball more. So much of what I most cherish between us was offered in the doing, in the examples that he set. But these are among the things he said to me that have proven unforgettable. When you go out in public, son, he said, the first thing people are going to notice is your hair. Then your shoes. So pay attention to those things. He said, power concedes nothing without a demand. He was quoting Frederick Douglass, the legendary activist who fought for the abolition of slavery. That's the way of the world, Dad said. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Don't go looking for a fight, he said. But if you have to get into it, hit the guy in the nose right away, as hard as you can, and hope he doesn't get up. That's just excellent advice, as hard as it is to pull it off. When I told him I was fed up with the Cub Scouts and wanted to quit, he said he wouldn't resist me on that, but I should remember, he said, every time you quit something that's hard, it makes it easier to quit the next thing that's hard. You don't want to be a quitter. Back in town for the summer after my first year in college, he found out I was smoking pot, and he kicked me out of the house. He was protecting his other kids from me, lest they be influenced by my inexplicably terrifying lapse of judgment. This If he only knew. This hippie transgression on my part was hard on the heels of mine having quit my intended studies in political science to try my hand at becoming an actor. Seemed like a good idea to him, I'm sure, but he didn't let on that that's what he might have thought. After that, when I'd visit, we would fumble our way into difficult conversations about what he perceived to be my generation's rejection of the values by which we'd been raised. And there arose between us a degree of estrangement that lasted a long time. He'd say, "You smoke that stuff every day. That means you're addicted." And I'd say, "Well, at least I don't drink." "What about you? You have coffee every day. Maybe that means you're addicted." At some point in this ongoing debate, he offered to give up coffee if I'd give up weed. I quickly declined to make that deal. But later, decades after I did indeed quit weed and had become addicted to coffee myself, I was amazed that he had the courage to offer to give up coffee. We went back and forth about the reasons for all the horror stories about these illegal substances and the reasons that so many animals are drawn to that which alters their minds. And it came to light that his decision to live a sober life was based on an appetite for remaining in control of his faculties and his respect for the implicit virtue that discipline carries. And you can't argue with that. Our capacity for self-control is a virtue. Drugs and alcohol are the enemy of that virtue. No one can say otherwise. I had to retreat to defending a far less obvious virtue, the virtue of surrender, the possibilities of revelation that may come when control is abandoned, but that's a hard case to make. Leaving it at that for quite a while, we didn't have much further to say. But after more than 6 years of this long disquiet, at Acapulco Restaurant, December 73, Dad put an end to it. It was the occasion of his 50th birthday, and it was attended by the whole family. He took a seat at the head of a long table. I made it my business to sit in the nearest seat next to him, right off his shoulder. The waitress came, and Dad did the most amazing thing. He smiled at her, and he ordered a margarita. Like almost everyone else at the table, I immediately ordered a margarita too. And in the reverie that followed, we talked about how hard it had been to be at odds with each other for so long. Yeah. I told him that contrary to rejecting him, I was deep in the process of becoming him and proud of it. He told me he had pushed me away because he thought it might help to save me. And from that day forward, our friendship was steady and remarkable comfort to both of us. When I introduced him to Leslie, Leslie came out to the desert to visit us at the cabin. I introduced her to the family in the middle of the night. You know, in the dark. There was no electricity, nothing. The next night, we're at the campfire, and Leslie gets her first glimpse of the fact that my father, because of Billy's influence, has decided to become a cheater at these games. They're cheating. There's bold-faced cheating, and Leslie was genuinely upset by this. She asked Dad to come inside the cabin, cement floor. She said, "I want to try an experiment with you. Put your hands out, put your palms facing the floor, put your hands out." And she took glasses of water, 2 glasses of water. She put one on each hand, and then she left. And so he understood that Leslie was going to fit in well. He was genuinely delighted that I had finally brought Leslie into our lives. And he looked at me and said, dude, he said, Abel, you did good. 20 years later, when I couldn't get a job and Les and I were losing our home, Dad reminded me repeatedly that the good thing about my profession was that it could turn on a dime, that the possibility of a reversal of fortune was no further away than one unexpected phone call. It meant the world to me that he kept saying that. He took care of all of us when we were in trouble. We did our best to do the same for him. For years, I felt that I could talk to him about anything and that he would get it and offer insight. Not only the good stuff, but all the worst things in the world. We could talk about it all. It was hard for me to let go of that. And I was late to figure out that I needed to, with thanks to my brother Greg for waking me up. But eventually, our capacity to hold all the heartbreak, we witness just goes away. Eventually, we just don't know what to say about it anymore. We no longer have the energy to go there. I feel the beginnings of that fatigue working on my own spirit now as I age and witness myself flowing inexorably down the same stream of life's changes that Dad and Mom navigated so well, the same stream in which they followed their own parents, and so on, as always it shall be. What's most important to declare today, as has already been declared, is that it's a great blessing to be associated with this family, whether by blood or by choice. All of us have been nurtured in the shelter of the love of Adolph and Blanche. In closing, I want to acknowledge the gift that Dad bestowed on us in the early days of his teaching career, when he brought his classroom songbooks home. Along with an auto harp, he would press the buttons and strum the chords as he taught us the songs, and we'd sing. The first was Santa Lucia, and it was the beginning of our family's devotion to song. I'll just say that through all of the wonderful experiences our clan has had in this room, my happiest memory is of the morning 30 or 40 years ago when Dad and I stood together 2/3 of the way back on that side. We stood shoulder to shoulder in the midst of the congregation, our hymnals open in our hands, and sang together for a few minutes in harmony. In this world, his was an absolutely beautiful voice. And with that in mind, it's my pleasure now to introduce his granddaughter, Devon, to sing a song he so deeply loved.
Thank you, everyone. So good to see you. Ave Maria, gratia benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesu. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Maria, gratia plena, Maria, gratia plena, Ave, Ave Dominus, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesu. Ave Maria.
Hey, Jim, same thing. If you have something you want to say, you and Crystal, come up and speak to us. And after that, we do have microphones set up in the activity center, and we would invite your comments and memories of our dad and mom, okay? Jam's over there, you're here.
Okay, well, I wasn't expecting to come up here and speak, and I've been crying this whole time, so I don't even know if I can read the words, but I'm going to try. Yeah. My name is Crystal. I'm Bill's daughter, and I just wanted to say how truly blessed I am to be born into this amazing family. My grandparents always taught me that no matter how tight money might have been or how they were struggling through anything in their lives, they always made room for another mouth or mouths to feed and provided a safe place for someone to sleep if it was needed. They took in families of people and all the friends. I always remember as a child, that house was never empty. It was always full. My grandparents were exceptional human beings who taught us grace and kindness towards our fellow human beings. Adolph provided his family financially while Blatch took care of the home. They made the perfect pair. Well, my grandfather served his country, but what means more to us is how he spent time with his family. Campfire stories out at the cabins, tennis lessons, which I personally was horrible at. Talk about draining someone's patience when you keep hitting a tennis ball like a baseball and sending it right out of the court. And that was me, and he still tried. My grandfather chose education as his professional career. He spent many years in education at Haddon Elementary. And even at the time of my grandfather's passing, this is the part that truly amazed me. My grandfather still continued to educate children by donating his body to a medical center so children could still continue to learn. And that speaks to who my grandfather was. He was always giving. In life and in death, he was always there to educate and to help. I watched my grandfather soften over the years. As we all know, I was the product of a very young childhood pregnancy. However, so my grandfather was still kind of a dad. you know, and Jam and I, we never really messed around with Grandpa. We knew our place. Grandpa was still strict and, you know, stern, and you never messed around with Grandpa when it came to eating. But then Rach and Nick came, and then the wall started to break down because he would guard his TV tray, but at the same time, all the littles that came since Rach and Nick all were able to break down, and Grandpa shared his TV tray meals with a little bit of a smile. He was basically outnumbered, and he had to surrender. So my grandfather served his family in so many different ways, and as a grandchild, he stepped up. He went to Donuts for Dads with my kids when my husband couldn't because of work. He played taxi driver to and from school. And near the end of my grandmother's life, well, you've all heard, he even stepped into the nursing role to assist in that way as well. My grandfather picked up so many roles for all of us, any which way. He served his country, he served his family, he served his friends. We all loved, admired, and respected him. But the reunion with my grandmother and his parents must have been the best day ever. So I just wanted to thank you all for being here and sharing this day with all of us. Thank you.
So one of my memories, I just remember watching Crystal, and this is Jeremy, who's a San Jose police officer, was when these two were at the campfire, and they decided to draw a mask on their face with permanent markers. It was a great day.
Crystal put more on me than I put on her. Thank you. So my name's Jeremy. I'm Mike's son. I'm the second grandchild. And one of the benefits I had, and I did test my grandfather more because I'd only be there for the summer, then I knew I got to leave. Right? Quickly here, I have just a little something to share. About a week before he passed, a week or so, I was driving home from work, and a memory I hadn't thought about in years popped into my head. In fact, I called Bill, and my dad were there at the house taking care of Grandpa. And I said, hey, can you share this with him? I hadn't thought about this in 40 plus years. It was being about 6 or 7, and on Delaban was like a lap you could run from the long hallway through the living room, through Rick's room, and I thought that was great fun. And I don't remember who else was there. I think it was just me and Grandpa, and I refused to listen to him. I was going. He told me to stop several times. I did not. I didn't realize how quick he was, and he actually got a hold of me, and I decided I was having none of that. And for the next about, I would say a good 10, 15 minutes, there was a power struggle that I lost, that he just held me tight. I said, please, that was a magic word, but the scissors would open, but it didn't work. It did not work. And so I sat, and finally I was done. He said, are you done? Yes, sir. And I was exhausted from fighting him for 15 minutes. But it brought me such joy to have this memory pop into my head about a week and a half before he passed. And they got to share that. Over the last few days, I've been thinking about him and thinking about what it is that really stood out to me was always his eyes. Whenever I would speak with him, felt like he was looking deep within me. He was seeing me, and I was seeing him. There was an unbelievable connection there. So I wrote a short poem that I'm going to share with you. It's called When I Look in His Eyes. When I look in his eyes, I see a young man, willing, able, and determined to serve his country, to serve and sacrifice to protect you and me. When I look in his eyes, I see a man dedicated to his community, to his wife, and to his family. When I look in his eyes, I see an old man, sharing his thoughts, his wisdom, and sharing his love with all who surround him and all he was blessed with from above. Today, in this life, his eyes no longer see, but there's hope the Lord gives to you and to me. I'll look in your eyes again one day, Grandpa. I'll look in your eyes and I'll see. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm just a puppet up here. Billy is really running this show. But Billy told me to tell you that there's hot food in the activity center, and literally, it's waiting for us to go eat it. There'll be a mic set up there. There's going to be some music probably, and anybody wants to say anything more, we'd sure love to hear it. And meanwhile, we'll be chowing down. Thank you all for coming. Much love, much love, much love, much love.